Welcome, friends and followers, to another episode of Transforming the HX, the new name for the show. That was the show without a name until this week. So we are here this week with Becki. Sorry, I'm working on technology at the same time here. With Becki Annastas. Did I say that right? Because I never get it right otherwise.
You did.
Awesome. Oh, awesome. I always put a few extra syllables in there. Julie's always like, no, that's not right.
No, try again.
So we are here with Becki. Becki is the owner of Dream Events and Catering, and it is a multi-award-winning catering company based in Nashville, but it services all the way from Nashville to Kentucky and all the way south to Alabama. And it is one of the top 3 catering companies in Nashville by volume, by size. So it is a large, doing a lot of business. And they've done some pretty exciting things in many, many years. Lots of different things that they've been a big part of. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those stories of things you've done. But I guess I really wanted to have you on the show today because what you do with these events changes people's lives. It's like it marks the milestones of lives. And for businesses, when you cater for businesses, a lot of times it's a special event for the business.
Right.
It could simply be just a luncheon, but it's something to give back to the employee. So almost every one of your events that I can think of as I was going through it is like, there's always something special going on. There's always marking some type of occasion. And that, in transforming the human experience, which is what we talk about on the show in a variety of different ways, we gather around food, we gather together with our friends and family, and we mark those moments of transformation. So with that, I'll let you tell us a little bit about your history, how you got to where you are today, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because you know so much about us anyway, and it's fun to hear you describe us because you've known us for, 10 years, a long time. So our company was formed in 1991, which is amazing to think. In my mind, that was just a few years ago, but it really wasn't. I've been with the company for 12 or 13 years. I've owned it for a little over 5. And we have just had such a fun, especially this last 5 years, such a fun time transforming it and changing with the times and changing really with Nashville's growth and just trying to keep up. And the way we grew it has really been very organic, and it's almost grown itself. We just had to sort of open our eyes and be aware that there was something that needed to be done and that we needed to pay attention to what was happening in Nashville. So we grew very organically and slowly. It didn't feel very slow, but really slowly and intentionally. And so it's felt very graceful, surprisingly.
Well, it's an interesting story too, because as you said, it started in 1991 and it really grew its way up. And you came in as a general manager, if I remember correctly, right?
I did.
Yeah. Okay. And the reason I know you, the reason we've known each other for about 10 years now is because, and this is more for the audience than for you, obviously, but my wife was the executive chef from 2010, I think it was, through 2014, somewhere in there?
So.
I think that's about when it was.
It might have been a little bit. It might have been 2009.
That's right.
I don't remember how much before the flood.
Yeah, she came on before the flood, somewhere in that range. Yeah, and I guess I guess she did come in before the flood because we ended up staying with you and your now husband during the flood. So yeah.
and your children were so small.
Yeah, they were like 3 and 5 at the time, maybe.
Yeah.
2 and 4, 3 and 5, somewhere there. But yeah.
Very monumental. Like it's easy to kind of pinpoint where our lives were at that point because it's just like you mentioned milestones. It's something very memorable that we can pinpoint it back to is that flood.
Exactly. And I think what stands out to me is in that flood, and this was one of those moments where, I at that point was an entrepreneur for a couple of years, running my own business and that. And you were GM and Julie was executive chef. And we went into this flood situation. And I remember just like all these businesses being closed, but people still had weddings and they had, events planned, and all these catering companies couldn't do what they needed to do. Right. And you guys stepped up and called all these different catering companies that needed help, that didn't have kitchens, and were able to, in really a heartbeat, open your kitchen up and really get a lot of stuff done. So, that's one of those moments. Let's talk about that for a second. What was that like? What did you kind of go through in that week after the flood, or right as a flood happened and the big event that came out of that for you guys and what you did there. Kind of brag on yourself a little bit here.
Yeah. So the flood happened so quickly, obviously. And we just did what we always do. It's really interesting because it's the nature of the beast. Like, this is what we do day in and day out. Whether there's a flood, whether it's a small situation, a large situation, we're trained to be able to handle the unexpected. We spend so much time planning for everything we can think of. And so then when the stuff comes up that we didn't plan for, we have more time, availability, and resources. And so when something like a flood comes, I mean, we just do what we do, which is scramble and put, one step and to the next step and one foot in front of the other until the pieces start to come together. And as the flood was happening, obviously, like, it was happening and it was quick, but you knew that it was going to stop any second. It wasn't going to go much further. At least that's what we thought. And so it was really just about managing those moments, a few moments at a time. And so we got a call. I'm thinking what you're probably thinking of is we got a call. I don't even know. Maybe the flood had just happened, maybe the day prior, but we had 48 hours outside of Steeplechase, which is a big horse race here. And some of the companies that typically catered for that had been flooded and couldn't handle it. And so what I vividly remember is Julie, your wife, and I setting up tables in the front of this office kitchen area that was just tiny. And we managed to get like 4 folding tables in there. And we set up our office and we were running the kitchen out of that. And it was just, everything had to happen out of, whatever square footage that was, 100 square feet, 200 square feet. It was tiny. And so we just started trying to help people and see what they needed. And it was, again, moment to moment. And I think we worked about 48 hours straight just to try to put the pieces together because everybody was in chaos and nobody really knew how to help. So we just did one thing, then the next, then the next. And before you knew it, we were out at Steeplechase, and I don't even know how much mud, so much mud. And we were out there just doing that. And it's amazing how that transformed our company because we learned how to do something that was slightly different than what we had done before. And again, there wasn't really any choice because we had to jump in and help our friends and neighbors. And so we just did it. And it's amazing what you can pull together and what you can do when you're challenged like that. You come up with stuff that you didn't even realize you knew how to do. You just kind of fake it till you make it, which I think is a big theme with entrepreneurs. Hopefully they don't know that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm just going to keep going until we get through it. And then, go back and analyze and look and see what could have been different. So that was a big changed the course of really what we did after that, because we had jumped into something so large that we were able to then tout that we could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's such a significant moment because what I remember, and, I may have lacking a little bit of memory here, but I know from there you guys went in and did a lot of work with was it CMT Country Music Awards or CMA, I guess.
Yeah.
You went in and began to really go with Governors Association, all these different types of things that were coming to town where they weren't in a hotel setting and they were looking for special meals and things like that. And so you became kind of this go-to with a great reputation. So kind of fast forward for us, you ended up coming in as a general manager, worked that for several years then, and then you decide, okay, it's time to buy this business. It's time to take it over. And there was a huge transformation, at least from the outside, because by that time my wife had left, but there's a huge transformation in what you guys did to you and your husband and that to really bring this business up. So what does that look like?
So that was very well timed in that the previous owner had decided he was ready to move in a different direction right as I was trying to decide what direction I needed to move in. So it was very interesting. And when my husband Thomas and I talked about buying the business, I always had a vision of what I thought the company could be, what it should be, what it naturally needed to be. And so this was the great opportunity to be able to transform it. Prior to that, it was a Dream Come True Events and Catering. And so then we changed it to Dream. So it had the same skeletal system, the same solid foundation, but then we were able to expand our offerings and just change up our look and a little bit of our culture and how we presented ourselves. And that was really that's really, I guess, when it became so real to me, because I feel like it's always been my company. Everywhere I've ever worked, I've always treated it like I owned it. I mean, that's how I manage, that's how I make decisions. And so it was a natural progression. So when people say, like, how long have you owned it? And it's 5 years, and it seems like for easily 10 years or so. So we were able to just sort of bring to life what we knew was always there. And a big thing I think that we did that was so smart is that we found people who did things that we did not do well. You know, marketing is not my forte. Even down to our aesthetic, I can remember our Path and Compass was the company that helped us sort of rebrand and transform that. And she would ask me questions, and I could explain colors, and I could explain, like, you know, like this magazine or this website, and I couldn't really put it into words, and she was able to extract whatever it was that I was giving her and help us really pull it into a brand. So we were smart enough to find different pieces that we were able to find experts that did those things really well that could translate, which is ironic because that's what we do for our clients. You know, it's just a different product. So so they really kind of helped bring us to life and get our name out there, that there was change and that we had decided just to sort of expand our offerings and kind of get our feet under us, find our own groove.
Yeah, it was really cool to watch that transformation, seeing it happen. But it was interesting because you said that you had to bring in an expert to help you translate. And I was thinking about it before you even said, I was like, that's what you do every day. You sit there and listen to people coming in wanting to have a wedding or a special event, and you have to imagine what that can look like. Even probably you got to translate what they're saying and then imagine what it could look like and turn it into that for them. So you've got a team of people there that do this with you now. How has that team really grown over the last couple of years, maybe the last 5 years? And what have you found that's been really beneficial?
Same theme. Finding people who do things really well that I specifically don't, whether it's that I don't do them well or it's not my best use of time. And I heard somebody say that years ago in Nashville, but when she learned that was critical, her whole company changed. And so when you look around at our staff now, you see pockets of talent that are very distinct and they're great. Like, we have just such a good pool of talent and people who do so many different things and have different styles themselves. They also, you know, communicate differently and they talk to clients differently. They can hear things differently from clients. So it's really about letting people be who they naturally are and how does that all fit into one big bowl together. And so one transformation that was difficult for me was the pieces of the business that I loved so much. Like, there were things in the kitchen that I absolutely loved to do. And there was something with them that would sort of feed me. But as we got larger, I had to begin to let those go and let other people do them. And that was fairly painful because, you know, when you are an entrepreneur often and when you work a lot, that becomes part of your identity. And so to be able to let those things go, to have the right people around me that I knew that I could let them go and I could trust those people to be able to do those things, that was a huge moment for Dream, because then we were able to really start letting departments become more autonomous, where we had always tried to do everything together. You know, we were getting to the size where we had to start, you know, segregating groups off to be able, so they could focus on their area a little bit better. So what we have now are all those different people who can translate and can recreate, and they can mirror what the client is trying to express. They can extract it and turn it into this event that is hopefully everything that client dreamt of. And I get to watch it because I'm no longer the best at a lot of these things, which is a really, really good thing because there's so many people who can do those things better than myself. But design is one where we've got just some of the best designers and they just love it. So it's not even like a job, you know, they just get to create, whether it's food or a centerpiece or the look of an entire event. And we also have designers that are part of the company that really love to design how the processes are and how the company functions and how it, there's so many different levels to what design looks like. So that's really, I think, where we're most successful is aces and places and letting people be who they want to be. And we really try to fit that all in. They say hire for the job that you need filled, and we try to hold to that. However, sometimes you meet people and they're just so good at what they do. You want to fit it around them because you want them to be part of what you are. And we've got a lot of that as well.
It's very interesting to hear you talk about that, because that transition there between you as the entrepreneur, like that identity you have and the dream you have, the dream for the dream, right?
Right.
and as you're building that, once you make that shift and you step out of the day-to-day, if you will, that I'm not going to be in the kitchen, I've got to be over here doing these things as the CEO, as the owner, there's a risk there that a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, get afraid of. And
Absolutely.
if you don't step back from that, your company basically has the same identity as you, and you have the identity with the company. And if you don't separate those, you can't grow, as you said, beyond that certain point. So it's really interesting to hear that. And then, of course, if you have the faith and the trust and you step forward and you move past that point and you hire the right people, then you just have something amazing happen. So
Right.
It's very cool to see. It's very great advice for entrepreneurs too. Absolutely.
And I think you really made a good point. You become what you think you're doing is protecting your company, and what at some point you actually are hindering the growth of your company, because you hopefully have the right people around you that can take it to the next level. And so if you continue to do all of those things, then you're really never going to get any bigger or better than you are at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me turn the conversation a little bit for a second. Let's talk about what has been like maybe one or two of your most favorite events that you guys have been that you're able to talk. I know you can't talk about all of your clients,
Right. Right.
but what are some of your favorite events that you guys have done?
So it's funny when you say favorite events. There's such a just huge spectrum of different events and why they're favorite for different reasons. So there are some that have come out of catastrophe. Like during the flood, I can remember the couple that was getting married right on 2nd Avenue, and we're looking out the windows or watching the water rise. And so, that was very memorable. And every year when I see on Facebook their anniversary come around, I can go back to that moment and remember where I was. I can only imagine what the memories are for them. And then there are big moments like Steeplechase, when we did it, and we did it in 48 hours, and we did it with using other people's menus. And so there were moments that we really got to conquer things. I would say right now, sitting at the beginning of July, one of my favorite was just last week, where we had the honor of doing some stuff for the fallen Brentwood police officer for his celebration of life, and to be able to be part of that. Because I was thinking about that, reflecting over the past week and thinking about why that was so monumental for our company and for us. But it's because it fulfilled each one of our staff that were there, because in crisis, it's a Southern way that you're supposed to feed people. You're supposed to bring food. What can I do to help? Let me bring you dinner. Let me bring you a meal. And so often that there's not a lot of opportunity for that. And so we just had a monumental opportunity to be able to provide what we felt like was some level of comfort, because that's what we do. That's our love language, is to feed people. And so to be able to be part of that was truly an honor. To be able to see it, to be able to see it from an event perspective, to see all of the different pieces and things that have to happen, and how that comes from an organization that you would never think about being any good at events. That's not what I think of the police department for, but we really saw some very impressive things, and we got to work with some really good people, but most importantly, we got to be hopefully a little tiny piece of comfort when people were having one of those milestones and one of those moments, those life-changing moments. And it's like that a lot, of course, for the social events, weddings, when you get to see, what the biggest fear is, whether it's that people won't dance or people won't eat everything on their plate. What is it that person needs to have validated? And so once we know that and we're able to accomplish it, and we can recognize it across the room, and we see the fear going away because everybody's dancing or everybody cleaned their plates or whatever it is. And you see the client and the relief, because that's what they needed to be right, so they could truly enjoy it. And that happens a lot with corporate too. You mentioned at the beginning, while they're milestones, a lot of times for corporate, someone's job may depend on it, or the trajectory of their company with whatever meeting they're having, or the relationship they're trying to build in those moments. Somehow we're tiny little pieces of that. And so it really has a lot of influence where you wouldn't think it does. So we just feel like we're part of something all the time. We're kind of part of everybody else's story. And then we've done some really crazy creative things, like, Wizard of Oz themes. And we did an amazing Harry Potter themed wedding I think it was last November. Time is passing so quickly, but we've done some really wacky stuff, and we've gotten to see a lot of really interesting people and really impressive people. But I think the most fun are really the little things where you see that client and that confirmation of what they needed just got fulfilled. And I think those are my favorite. And also, when my employees are excited, those are the best, because then you have the recognition of understanding that you have provided this job where they don't feel like they're working, because they are so fulfilled and they're enjoying themselves. And so that's all we can really wish for in life, or, whether it's as an entrepreneur or a business owner or an employee, is just to be able to do those things and it not feel, for it to be enjoyable and not feel grueling. Everybody doesn't have that opportunity.
Yeah. It's such a cool, the way you describe that. You've got your client, yourself, your employees, everyone coming together like at that moment. And when it all works right, it's fulfilling for everyone involved. It's a magical moment. Honestly, it's like that's just so fantastic when that happens.
Yeah. We're also able to be part of conversations, because with weddings specifically, one of the things that we really try to impress is, remember why you're here, what the point of today is. And even if it's not a wedding, even if it's any kind of event, really, like, what is the point of this? Because if you get lost in the flowers or the rain that might be coming or whatever if you get lost in that, you miss the moment. And if nobody's reminding them of that moment, then, they may not even have the memories that we think that they should have. We want them to remember whatever the 3 important things are from that event. We want them to remember those. And so it's part of our job is to keep them on track, to make sure that they're not getting lost in the fluff and the other stuff, and they're not getting distracted from what we know is going to validate what they wanted.
Yeah, like the real transformational moment, keep them focused on that, and you guys take care of everything else in the process. Now, I have to tell you, when I asked the question of what were some of your favorite events, your husband chimed in here on Facebook. I'm watching it. He said your wedding.
That was a pretty good one. It's funny, but it's like the barber that never cuts their own hair, because that's what they do all the time. So I never even think about, myself. And it's funny that he says our wedding, because while it was fun, there was a lot of our wedding that was, it was what I did all the time. So there was like a list. There were lists upon lists upon lists. And I had the luxury of having a lot of people around me that could help me, that, knew me well enough to know what was important and what wasn't, including your wife, Chef Julie. But, another one really was, I joke and say our grand opening here was like my second wedding, because it really felt like we had it was just monumental, like the wedding was, and we were able to enjoy it and experience it with our favorite people. And it was right there with my wedding. I'm sure he appreciates me saying that, but I've said it before, but it was because it was really something we had created together. And It was such a symbol of like our next phase and us building something together. And it also expressed so much of our hard work that, we had in our first 5 years of marriage. This was like showing what we had built and getting to put it out there. It was like having a third child, where we got to put it out there and to see what it would become. And it literally was our third child, because we made a choice. Are we going to have another child, or are we going to buy this business? And the business was every bit as exhausting.
And probably even more so at times.
Yeah. Yeah. They're neck and neck often.
Yeah. That's an interesting way. I never really thought about my business as a child, but yeah, very much the same thing. It's like you're thinking about it a lot. You're like, okay, where do we go next? What do we do next? If this doesn't work, then what? And it matures just like
Right.
a child does.
And it's all day. It's
Yeah.
never a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
You think about it when you're going to bed, and does this decision I make affect my children? Does it affect my business? Everything is just part of a bigger picture. It all goes hand in hand. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's interesting. So, and I love those events you talk about there, because they really show what your role is and how you play in that. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit again. Nashville has grown tremendously, and you guys have grown with Nashville, which is very cool to see. I moved down here with Julie in 2000. Yeah, it was summer of 2000. We moved down here. And so we have seen massive change. Talk about what you've seen, maybe what's changed in catering. Maybe if there's something broader that you see that's changed in Nashville. And talk about that a little bit. Tell me about what you see there.
So the most exciting thing about the change that I've seen, obviously the growth, and with those things come traffic and things like that, which we don't ever complain about, because if there's traffic, that means that we're growing, and that means that business should be doing better. And so we just take the good with the bad. But it's really how the food scene has changed. And I would say that started probably 5 years ago, where we started kind of taking, I guess, influence from other cities, and certainly from celebrity chefs that were coming to town, but where people really got extremely passionate about food, but it was bigger than a hobby, where everybody always had dinner parties, but dinner parties started to become different, and they started to become occasions and moments, for gatherings where your friends and family were affected. And I think that once people got a taste of that, that was the new standard. And so everything that every restaurant or caterer or any kind of food person, every farm, every time that everybody took it up one step, that was the new standard. And then another step, and that was the new standard. And that is really what changed us, because the expectations were high. And Nashville has done a really good job of maintaining those, holding not just celebrity chefs, but a lot of the restaurants, they hold them to high standards. And I've read many articles where the chefs and owners of restaurants are saying that's what keeps us so good, is that our clients expect it, and our customers demand it, and we have to fulfill it. And so it's really this strange team effort that the city drives those measurements, I suppose. And so with that, catering was allowed to be better. Nobody expected catered chicken anymore, because that's not what you're getting in even hotels, and that's not what you're getting in the restaurants. Everything's got to be better. So we were able to grow with that. And it's the same thing with the standards and expectations. What you expect in a restaurant is what you expect when you go to a nice event. And so it also allowed us to open up the pricing a little bit, because obviously the nicer, the more organic, the more farm to table, the more intricate things have to be, affects the price. And so Nashville started allowing some of that to enter in and be expected and be fulfilled. I think with the growth, it's allowed a lot of people to grow. There are a lot more venues. There are a lot more really good vendors that we work with. And there are some that have been around for a long time. And I think they would say the same thing about the expectations that people have on us, and that's what keeps us fresh. We've got some amazing, friendly competitors that we are able to sit down at a table with and talk about, how we can grow together as a community and an industry to be able to maintain our standards, but also maintain, our quality and integrity as that's happening. Because with growth, there are always some really strong businesses, and there are always some that are kind of under the radar that maybe aren't following all of the rules, that might be kind of shaking things. So we're able to really bind together to make sure that we're working for a greater good and for a bigger picture, and working for Nashville, and making sure that we are developing people and doing the right things to develop our industry, because the industry, will keep going. The plan is that it will keep going, Corona or not, it will keep going, and that we are able to continue to feed the future, not just the present. I think some of the struggles are, the cost of living, of course, has become very difficult for people. So for our employees, that's difficult for them to be able to work in the city and afford to be close. And so that's something that we really try to monitor and measure. And it's, one of the things that's reflected in our pricing is that circle of, making sure that we're taking care of our employees so they can be here when they're needed to be able to fulfill our obligations and what we promise our clients. But generally, the growth has been fantastic for us. And not even generally, specifically, it's been incredible for us. We've just been able to take advantage of it, and just our timing was spot on. And so it was our transformation was at a time where Nashville was ready for it. And so it was really perfectly timed. I wish I could take credit for that, but it just was kismet, I suppose.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I was thinking back as you were talking through the timeline there. Gaylord Opryland's been around for 35 years or something like that. But I think it was 2013, Marriott came in and took over management. Mm-hmm. And so there was a huge shift there. And then that transition took a little bit of time, probably 2 years at least. And then you've got the brand new, was it Music City Center, the big convention center opening up, right? And so all of these things, and of course the downtown, we're still seeing massive building projects going on right now, but the number of hotels that have opened downtown. So Nashville became this spot to come to visit, to have the girlfriend parties and all the other stuff going on. So you're right. It's like there's this timing thing that happened with all these different elements that brought it all together at the same time. So one of the other things that I know, in just some of the work that I've done, the research I've done in the customer experience side, is 2016 is the peak year that millennials came in, right, into the workforce. And now they're in some of those early management roles, mid management roles, so they've got changing tastes and all of that. But then beyond that, you've got Generation Z, which is, my kids. Mm-hmm. They have had an impact on, veganism or vegetarianism, or, farm to table. That concept was there, but more like the free range and cage free. So what has changed in the food industry in the last 5 years? Because you've been living that change, and so it's broader than just Nashville, but it's like there's a change in for sustainability and all that kind of stuff. What's happening there for you guys?
Well, an interesting thing with the sustainability piece is a lot of our clients expect that, but what's been surprising is some of the larger corporations that expect it. Vanderbilt's a great example of, they've got some incredibly impressive initiatives that they're trying to have, different things that they're going to meet over the next few years. And so when people demand that, then we, while it's always a passion for us, and it's actually a big staple for what some of our beliefs are, but it's easy to say that, it's easy to believe it, but when your client says that you have to do it, then all of a sudden it just kind of, everything has to happen faster, and so it really gets you on board quicker. So we love that. The millennials love millennials, because millennials are just what I was speaking about. They hold you to a standard. They want to know what you're going to do, and they want you to do what you say you're going to do. And so that makes it easier for us because, it becomes a lot more black and white. And so we make a lot of decisions based on, how is this going to go over? If we use this particular platter, is that going to be a positive and negative amongst this generation or that generation, or corporate or social? And so it's just another standard that's in place, and vegetarian and veganism and all of the, dietary restrictions, choice or allergens, and all of that, just higher standards and higher standards. And even with COVID-19, higher standards. So that works well for us because it's just another challenge. And then you conquer it, or you figure it out, or you figure out what needs to be on your menu that wasn't on there before. And it just becomes your new baseline. And so then you just grow from there. So you don't really even realize that it's happening. It's just one step in front of the other. And you just try to keep up that way. But, veganism is I know you've eaten more vegan than you probably ever anticipated in your entire life. But I've learned so much about food from different things that people have expected and, wanted on their menus, and, the whole menu for 300 people, dairy free or whatever. And it's a challenge. So we get to figure out, okay, how this has to be every bit as good as any other meal we've ever made. And it has to be dairy free. That's not always naturally easy until you've done it a few times and can kind of figure out how it goes. And again, aces and places, that's no longer my forte. So I have people who are incredibly passionate about that, and very sensitive to the reasoning behind it, whether it's preference or allergens or, religious beliefs or whatever it might be. They're very passionate that those things are important. And I think that comes with potentially the different generations that are, again, creating those standards and holding us to them.
It's fascinating because it's like you're talking about all of these different challenges that you've gone through, and it's just it must be part of the culture. I mean, to be able to take it on. And I know, I mean, I can go back 5, 6, 7 years ago, whenever it was that Julie was there, and that was part of the culture then too. It was like, okay, we got something new. How do we deal with this? A lot of figuring it out as we go, experimenting, trying new things, but it's like that is now part of everything you do. It's just another challenge comes down the pike. Okay, let's take it on. Let's do it.
But aces and places again, Julie was really the first one because she came from a medical background. And so that was right at the time. I feel like allergens were becoming a larger conversation. And so she was very passionate about it because medically speaking, she had experience with it. She understood the gravity of it. And from a nutritional perspective, she was just very passionate about it. So she really was there at a time where we needed that expertise to be able to catapult in that direction. And it's just never stopped. And I feel like every time something like that comes up, it's interesting how that particular person is sitting in front of you. And maybe you didn't know why they were there before, and all of a sudden it's very evident that they are holding the key to your next level of growth.
Right. So on that totally off the wall question, do you tend to follow intuition or logic more? What kind of drives you?
I try to follow intuition because I definitely feel like there is an extreme amount of, I've received a lot of validation from that. There are a lot of times though where I have to listen to the voice of logic, and occasionally I have to, right now in this climate that we're in right now, I have to use more logic than I'd like because intuition doesn't seem to have, it's so new and there's not a lot for intuition to provide. So I lean on intuition. I hope that my intuition is right. And I do get validation there, but logic has to play a part in it at some point. Unfortunately, I guess.
Yeah. I'm a recovering, well, some people say I haven't recovered yet, but I'm a recovering nerd. So logic is the norm for me. And I'm learning to trust my intuition. So I'm leaning more into intuition right now, actually, than I am logic. Because the models don't work anymore. The models that I used to use to make decisions just don't work right now. So one of the questions that came up here as I'm watching the feed on Facebook is that, what has been your biggest challenge, or how are you restructuring your business? How are you dealing with the social distancing, with the pandemic and all the things that are happening there? Kind of walk us through what's changed and maybe what you see as things that'll stay and things that will probably go away once you can. Right.
So the biggest challenge has just been how abruptly this feels like it's happened. A lot of the data looks a little bit like 2008, 2009, 2010, where things slowed down quickly. The difference is that was a little bit, you could understand that a little bit more. There was a little bit more, people were talking about it as far as predicting, and it just felt like there was more data here. This just seemed to happen so fast. And there's some data that looks similar, whether it's, a sales decrease or increase, or even what's being said out in the world about when we're going to come back or how we're going to come back. But it's when this first started, I tell people, can you remember several months ago when I said, this is going to last like 2 or 3 weeks and it'll be done. I'm like, I cannot believe that I believed that, but we didn't know what we didn't know. And so we were slow for the first few weeks to make decisions, and then quickly realized that this was huge and we had to make some dramatic decisions. And as far as what as far as what it's done to our industry, it's brought it really to a screeching halt. And specific to events, the strange thing about events are they seem to be one of the last few things that are going to have the opportunity to come back. While some of them are coming back in smaller numbers, which is great, and I think that is part of the new future. There's still so much question as to whether or not you're going to be able to have that small event. So even then, there is just so much uncertainty, and so much of our job has turned into, I guess, sort of like counseling, where we're trying to help people navigate this life event, whether it's graduation or a wedding or even just a really important meeting or a product launch or whatever it might be. We're trying to help them navigate that in the most responsible fashion for both parties, while none of us have any idea what any of that means or is going to be in the future. And so with, venues specifically, and with events, the numbers are not allowed to come back like restaurants, for example. Restaurants are operating at 50%. And a lot of other places are able to have what we would call a gathering, but an event is still not allowed beyond certain numbers. So the challenge is really just trying to figure out how to pivot if we can. We've had lots of different ideas. We have several things in the work. We've got a launch of a new sort of casual concept that we just rolled out. And back to logic and intuition. My intuition says that that's what we need to be doing. We need to try to find ways to reinvent. But logic also tells me don't throw 10 irons into the fire at the same time. But then back to intuition. This is something unknown. So maybe 10 irons in the fire is what we're supposed to be doing. It's such a Jekyll and Hyde roller coaster. But as far as where we're headed in the future, I definitely think that smaller events are going to be necessary for a while. From a business perspective, that's disappointing because we thrive on large events, but we also have a lot of small events, and we very much are relational. So we want to build relationships with people where we do the small and the large and the casual and the fancy, and we're really their one stop. So whether they just need drop off food or they need full service event planning, we're really that everything for that person, hopefully. So in that regard, I think we're still in a really good place, but with the small events, while we thrive on large events, with the small events, it's really pushing people to have to prioritize what is important to them. And so, like I spoke about before, where we might have to try to keep a bride back on track, why are you really here? What is the point of today? We're able to do that with these smaller gatherings and say, okay, is it really about having 15 different vendors that come to this event, or is it really about having your immediate family socially or physically distanced, where they can all be here safely and then you can feel comfortable? So it's just allowing us to reprioritize and help them reprioritize things. But I definitely would like to get back to, where the restrictions can be more in line with what the client wants, instead of just what's happening. But it is what it is, and we're trying to pivot and look for opportunities and look for, relationships to get stronger, whether it's with our clients or our vendors or our employees, just lots of different angles.
Yeah, it's a tough place to be in. And I think food service is one of those that hospitality and food service together is going to be hit. And as you said, you're talking earlier how Nashville has grown. Nashville relies so heavily on the tourism and the hospitality. I mean, the meetings industry is massive. It's such a huge part. We live across from Opryland, and it's been closed up until I think this past week. They just reopened, and we drove by the other night and we saw the gates were open. Like, finally. I mean, that's been such a big part of our life, with it being right here. And I used to work for the company and that. So, it's fascinating to see, because I don't, no one really knows how we're going to come back. No one knows how quickly it's going to happen. So it's good to hear there's pivoting happening. Do you see, are there other caterers in the industry that you're seeing? I know I've seen some of the restaurants that have had to close down that are not going to reopen. Are you seeing the same thing happen with in the catering world there?
So far, I've not seen many caterers have to close. Nationally, we're in several networking groups where, we're able to talk to people in other areas. Several of them closed temporarily. Certainly in different states, there were different requirements. But our biggest thing, I would say, with our friendly competitors is that we're really trying to find opportunities to align more, to sort of protect each other, because it's not really helpful for one of us to have to go just dramatically in a different direction, because it really could shake up the financial piece of what our industry needs and expects to be able to function at the level that we do. Of course, restaurants are having to close, some temporarily, some permanently. The destination management has taken an extremely devastating hit. And of course, even just some of the smaller planners that are really having to pivot and look at different things and figure out how to financially restructure. So I'm seeing a lot of it across the board, but the biggest thing is just the pivoting and trying to figure out how do you stay loyal to your brand and you don't water it down, but you stay alive. And those two things, before this happened, it was always brand, and you don't want to ever water down your brand, and you don't want to confuse your brand. And now we're more in an environment, while that's still important, it's not necessarily the most important thing.
Survival
right now
might be more important than brand at the point.
Because this is devastation like nobody ever expected.
Yeah.
And nobody could have predicted. And I, even talking to other people in nationally in other areas where they're saying, well, this is like the recession. And I'm like, yeah, but in the recession, I was an employee. I wasn't an entrepreneur at that point. And so for me, it's a very different experience, I think, than even having that experience as an employee and watching the company go through it. It was different. And we're so much larger than we were then. There are a lot more mouths to feed. There are a lot more responsibilities and obligations that we've made to our work family. So it's a very, very unique thing to try to navigate. But I do think that Nashville is trying really hard to support each other. They're trying to pull together, especially because we had the tornadoes right before COVID-19 hit us. And there's just so much community happening that's been really inspiring. And it just, back to intuition, it just makes me feel like this isn't all for nothing. It's got to rebound. And Nashville has grown so dramatically. There's no way it's going to be for nothing. There's no way it's just going to fall apart. It has to come back. That's the only logical thing that can happen, right?
Well, we went through the flood in 2010, so 10 years ago, and we saw, it took some time, but we saw the city come back stronger than it ever been before. The spirit that was there. And I do believe that Nashville is going to come back very strong. I mean, that's my optimism, but I think also realistic. We have a lot of good things in place. Mm-hmm. So let's turn a little bit again. I like taking these little pathways down to see where we go with them. So you're a female business owner, and one in an industry that has not typically been led by females. You are in the top 3 catering companies in Nashville, and you have this reach from Kentucky to Alabama, so you cover a lot of area. What is it like? What advice maybe would you give to other women? Because I believe right now, female-owned businesses, women-owned businesses are one of the fastest segments that are growing. Right. And what would you give as advice to women who are trying to build a business or thinking about building a business and getting into business? What are some really important things that they need to know and be aware of?
I think the biggest thing is probably surround yourself with people who are just really, really talented, and that are looking to prop you up. One of the biggest discoveries I had from one of my business advisors probably about 1.5 years ago is she said, do you realize that while you have all these goals, that there are people around you and their goal is to support you? No, I don't understand what you mean. And she's like, they don't want to be in the spotlight. There are people around you that really their ambition is to prop up this company and to make this company grow. And, to be able to recognize that it's okay to let people support you and let that be fulfilling for them, and really listen to that intuition and that voice telling you to move forward. And when that voice is telling you, oh, you're not good enough, or maybe you shouldn't do that, or, nobody else is doing that, or whatever the voice is telling you, to recognize that that's just your fear talking, and it shouldn't slow you down. Because what's the worst thing that can happen is that project doesn't work, or that direction doesn't work. And then you just take a few steps back and go a different direction, which we do so often and we don't even realize it. It's just, as a female business owner, I think we give that more voice than it should be allowed to have. And I think that just making sure that if you have a little bit of it and you want more of it, then you just have to go for it. Another person recently I heard say, if there were, and I'll totally botch what she said, but it was something like, if there was a job position available, and there was a man and a woman that were reading the same outline of what the criteria was. If the man had 1 of 10, he'd say, I can totally do that. I definitely need that job. I'm completely qualified. Yet a female might read that and only have 9 of the 10 and say, oh, I don't have 10 out of the 10. I can't do it. And it's amazing to hear that and realize that is so true for me, is that I'm going to look at that and say, I've only got 9 out of the 10. I don't have 10 out of 10. I'm not the right fit. And I'm trying to embrace that piece of, I've only got a few out of the 10. I'll just try it and see what happens. And see, that's just, however many more things I can learn while I'm there. But it's interesting to see that is recognized as a true difference in the way that people think. And I think that's something that we need to hold on to and realize the network around business in general, but women specifically, is so strong. So you have to surround yourself with those people and listen and figure out what they're doing, because it's just becoming more and more powerful. And it's just amazing to see, the different things that not only women are doing, but a lot of minority owned businesses are really taking off. And whether they leverage that or not, run the course that's in front of you and just run really fast until you get stopped. And then figure out what's next.
It's interesting. A couple things come out there is that intuition. We talked about that already several times, but it's like there's 2 voices in us, right? It's like that intuitive thing saying go or don't go, and it's based on something subconscious that you may not understand why. And then there's the voice of fear and doubt, which is not intuition; it's something else. It's like, do you have a way of telling those 2 apart for you, or is it easy enough to do?
It's not necessarily always easy, but it's the the inner mentor and the inner I don't remember what it's called. I'll call it the demon, but it's basically the one dragging you down versus you as a successful person in the future, and the voice telling you to move forward is that it's you in the future. It's you where you want to be, and that person is trying to pull you in that direction. And that other voice, is the one that's literally behind you, that you just have to say, that's not what I need to do. And to have faith that you're going to have what you need to have, that really there's a perception of control, but there's not very much control most days. You're just kind of dealing with whatever it is that comes at you and doing the best you can do with it. So realizing that you'll really always have what you need, regardless of what level that is, whether it's a little or a lot. And I think when you can do that, then you can focus on the task and let the voices go away, because they're just really distracting you from what you need to be doing anyway.
Yeah. I can see that. It's interesting because, like I said earlier, I'm learning to trust my intuition. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to go through that process sometimes and not fun at other times. So
I was talking to another caterer last Friday, and one of the things he said, we have to recognize that we're just coming out of a place of extreme abundance, where we have had so much abundance in Nashville, whether it's just in our industry or with events or with catering, but there's been so much growth and positivity that it's okay for the brakes to be pumped and us realize, kind of get back more down to a manageable level, because we've just been really operating and sort of expecting this entitled perspective of like, well, we've been getting all of this. We should continue to get all of this, and we should stay this busy, and we'll continue to grow, and it'll all continue to come our way. And, you just kind of forget that maybe that's not that's not the way it's supposed to be. So maybe
Right.
there's other things to focus on.
Well, and I think it's also important to recognize that we know that everyone's eating 3 meals a day, or they're
Mm-hmm.
still eating, right? It's that they may just be
Right.
doing it at home, or
Yeah.
so it's not like it's gone away. It's just a matter of when are they going to be ready to start connecting again, and seeing each other again and doing that again. So
And what's
um
going to be important when they do? Is it going to be
exactly.
the food? Is it going to be being able to do it physically distanced? What's really going to be the driving force at that point? And also, what's the driving force inside of your kitchen now at home in
Mhm.
your pantry? Because it's probably a little different than it was 4 months ago. When you knew that you had anything when you wanted it, and there was no need for real planning. And now we have this new sense of maybe we need to have a plan for what's in the pantry, and maybe we do need to have a little flour and toilet paper. I didn't
Don't have
really
to stop at the
expect
store every day.
yeah, I didn't really expect to need those things, but just what does the future look like, and whether the future is 6 months from now, or it's just what every single month looks like going forward, because we don't know when this is going to stop or slow down.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me ask you, what event or events really were challenging, but afterwards we already talked about steeplechase, but
Mm-hmm.
afterwards just were a mark for the business, like this changed who we are. So what are some of the other events you may have had that have done that for you?
So without giving too much detail, really, I would say there are a few that come to mind where the challenges were often where there were really smart people on the other side. So whether they were incredible designers, whether our client just really had a good vision of what they wanted, and it becomes a situation of a lot of coaches and not as many players. And I think those can become challenging because it puts strain on us, but we're also probably putting strain on them, because they see it one way, and really they want to have control of the entire thing, but then we're coming and doing what we do really well, and it's maybe not exactly what they expected. I think that actually happens a decent amount, whether the client is got a design background or a strong opinion of what's going on or not, but you can't help but have a visual or vision of what this event is supposed to be. So I think those are probably the most difficult, where we are feeling a lot of strain from them, but we also have to recognize that that means we're probably putting a lot of strain on them. But then it comes together in the end, and it's like so many other things in life where you look back and you're like, oh, that it wasn't really hard. It wasn't a big deal. There wasn't any tension. It was fine. Yet in the middle of it, that was not necessarily the case. But that is often what it takes to be able to pull off some of these really big events, because there have to be visionaries, and there typically isn't just one. And then there have to be the people who kind of all make sense and pull it together and bring it to life, because often the visionaries are not the ones that have the realistic expectations. There's a lot of area in between that have to be able to pull it together and make that work. So I think those are probably the most challenging. And we've had some weird things where, we've got a picture I can think of right now where we had two of our employees laying on the bottom of a fence wall, desperately trying to hold it down in the wind and the rain during a ceremony. So there are funny moments, but again, same thing, not funny at the time, just funny in hindsight when it all came together and it worked out well. But that's the fun part. I mean, that's the stuff, when people say you should write a book, or you need to tell these stories, because it's crazy some of the things that we see and do. And I think event planners are named as like one of the top 3 most stressful jobs or something like that. And it's so funny because we're always saying this is not rocket science, this is not heart surgery, this is like an event, it's like a fun party, but you forget in the middle of it, because it's so important to that person. And for us, from our perspective, our reputation is everything. And so there are moments where it feels like life or death, because we really want to be everything for that client. And we have to be their complete support system and make sure that they know that we're here to support them. And so we can't fall. So there's failure is not an option. They tell you not to say that, but we feel it all the time. Because you don't
Yeah.
get do-overs with a lot of these big events. There's no redoing, that important moment for that person and that milestone in their life. You don't get do-overs for a lot of those occasions.
It's interesting because in you look at like sports as an example, right? You've got athletes that practice for weeks and months and just to get everything right. So the one time they need that one play, it works. How do you deal with that? Because there's probably some practice you can do, but how do you deal with that so that people are flexible enough on the fly to make the change or to do what needs to be done so that it comes out right?
There's a lot of check and balances. So we have a lot of processes in place to try to make sure things don't fall through the cracks. We always say it's the small ones that we're most likely to goof up, because you just pulled off this huge event and then you turn around and the next morning you're doing this small event and your guard is let down. So we have checks and balances in place to make sure that can't happen. And we specifically have to verbally remind each other, don't forget the so-and-so on that one. And, because there's one I can think of. It's a breakfast that we've done for easy 10 years, probably 12. And I still say, don't forget this one product that we forgot like the first time I ever delivered it. So probably 10 years ago, but in my mind, that is so critical because we made the mistake once and we can't ever do that again. So, making sure that we're constantly keeping perspective and reminding each other and refreshing each other. And our core team is very good at that because they've had enough of the trials and tribulations or that thing they forgot that they have that hypersensitive awareness to make sure that they're reminding each other. And we've got a culture that we've really worked on the last few years. And one of the main things with our culture is that we have to be able to speak freely. So we have to be able to say, hey, you need to focus. You need to come back, or, I see that you're doing this or not doing that. And so we have to have that open dialogue because there's too much of an erratic nature for what we do. And it is so different, day to day. I mean, there's nothing that we feel like we do and it's the same as it was before. Everything feels like a brand new event, a new opportunity. We do say that we don't practice on your event. So if we're doing something new, we're going to practice here in-house multiple times to make sure that it's right, because there are no do-overs. But we have a really good culture of honesty and making sure that we're holding each other accountable. And that's the only thing you could do, because otherwise it's very easy for things to slip through the cracks.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you guys have really up-leveled the whole process and how you do things there. And we had you do the event for Julie, her 40th birthday party. And that was just a spectacular event, something she had no idea. She suspected, I think, about 10 minutes before it all came about. But, so it's funny because having those moments and being able to look back at those moments is really something special as a client, right? It was right. Awesome to see that. So with this job being, potentially as stressful as it could be, and with your team, with you, how do you go about filling back up again? Because you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a business owner, you've got all these people you're responsible for. How do you fill back up again?
So that's always the challenge. The whole concept of put the oxygen mask on yourself first sounds really good, but it's hard to remember to do that. So that's something that I've been working on for many years. I think that, the biggest thing is that I have an extremely supportive husband, and he is very good about picking up the slack when needed. I'd like to think that we both do that, but the reality of this business and the role that I have in our business is that a lot of the home duties fall to him frequently, which he loves and he's great at. But it tends to give me permission to be able to work more or do more. And so I have to just try to keep myself in check. I have several coaches around me that are generally, they're there to advise me for business, but every single one of them brings a personal element into it. And what are you doing about this? And how is this? And is this balanced? And, they very much believe that everything has to be in balance for your business to grow. Specifically, one of the funny things that we did recently is a few years ago, we bought a travel trailer camper. And we were not campers. We are not outdoorsy people. We rented an RV one time because Thomas wanted to try it and see if we liked it. I did not want to do it. I put it off as long as I could, and then he finally won. And so we went on this trip and we did like it. So then we bought a travel trailer, and it's just so funny because he grew up New Jersey, New York. So it's nobody's running around in a camper in, 1990 up there. And it wasn't their first stop for sure. So we did that, and that's really helped because it gives us a quick escape and we're able to go and be mindless. And that's really important for me because I don't have that switch that allows me to turn it off. But when we go to camp, I can sit and look at a fire, and I can manage that fire so well, and I can manage it so intricately in ways that are not recognizable, but that fill all of those things that really feed my brain. And that's probably, I'd say, where I get the most refuge. And of course, just trying to force myself to have some downtime, but I'm not good at that. It is definitely one of my biggest opportunities to work on. But I mean, and kids keep you humble, and having had me at home more the last few months, that there's no doubt they're going to hold me accountable for how much I'm working, because even, now when I say, oh, it's going to be a longer day, they're like, what do you mean? Like, you're not going to be home before the sun goes down? I'm like, yeah, remember that used to always be how it was. So I think they're going to make it hard for me to go back into old habits, which is good.
That's funny because kids can have very long memories or very short memories, depending on what's best for them. So
it's all very convenient.
Exactly.
Yes. It's very impressive how manipulative it is and how natural that comes.
Exactly. Comes at a very early age. I don't know if it's genetic or not, but
I mean, I'd have a hard time saying it's not, but I'd like to think it's not.
So this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming on here with me. Is there anything else that any place we didn't cover, anything you wanted to jump into for a few moments and share, or did we cover enough ground for you?
I was trying to think of just different ways to get like different perspective. I'm curious where you feel like Nashville has the biggest opportunity to grow with this industry, whether it's due to COVID or not, before or after. But what are the things you're seeing or feeling?
Thank you. That's a great question. Honestly, I have been, with a lot of my clients, not in this industry, but I've been counseling them. I said, right now, the biggest challenge I think we have with social isolation, without having the big events, without being able, I'm an introvert. So for me, this is heaven, being able to just look at Zoom or Facebook Live and just, I'm in my golden spot right here. But for a lot of people, it's not. There's a lot of extroverts that are not that way. And one of the things I've told them, I said, even if this isn't your business to be out there on Facebook Live or on doing a Zoom call or meeting with people, that is something that I think every business should really be focused on. Again, not that it's going to drive revenue right now, right, but those people are going to remember you later, especially if you bring something of value to them, even if it's just entertainment or distraction. My co-author for my most recent book and we launched a podcast. I guess it was for June 1st. So I'm doing this plus a podcast. I've got all kinds of things going on just because. Of
course you do.
Just because, right? Yeah. I'm one of those addicted business owners.
That's right.
And as we launch that, we've talked to CEOs from across the country, a lot of different industries. And one thing is consistent across it is being in front of your team, even if it's just having team meetings on a weekly basis, so your team knows you're there, they understand, they get a sense of certainty, being in front of clients as much as possible. Even again, if you're not doing business with them directly, but keeping that face there so that they know you're there, they know what's happening. They know there's a sense, because there we go. The more that you're available to them, the more that they're going to know that they can come to you when the time is right. As far as catering as a whole, I do think we're going to have to reimagine events. Mm-hmm. I do think that there's going to be much more focus on how do we do some things online, right? Mm-hmm. But then I think we also can get creative with those things and say, okay, if we do an online event, let's say we've got an event that's happening in 3 or 4 cities across the country. How can those companies that are putting on those events get localized caterers to do the events and deliver to other locations, right? Yeah. To, maybe it's, partnering with Grubhub or something like that to deliver an individual's thing to their home, but everyone kind of gets in, and that might drive the cost up a little bit, but imagine what that would do for the employees of a company or members of an association. Like they pay the price that they would pay for a normal ticket, and they get this meal delivered to them to their door. So while they're sitting there, they can be networking in the right type of virtual environment, having their meal.
Right. And that's going to be essential for fundraising as well,
Yeah.
because those galas depend on those. And
Yeah.
so we were able to do a drop off like that last night that was just a hit, where it was just a virtual situation and they wanted to drop off something at every location, and just raving reviews over it, because people are just desperate to still be able to have those kinds of events and feel that sort of interaction and experience, because it's definitely different than what you cook for yourself at home. And we've got several in the works where we have version A, B, and C, where, here's where we do, if we have 300 people in a place, this is what happens if we have 30 hubs of 10 people each. Do they pick it up here? Do we drop it off? And this is what happens if we have to deliver 300. Because we don't know what it's going to be like. But when you talk about having things in different areas, we have such great partnerships here with companies that specialize in that and that are able to do that. But then with our network of other caterers, those are such tight-knit networking groups that we're able to reach out and say, okay, who is in Austin? Who is in this part of California? And partner with different people so we can work on those kinds of projects together to be able to supply that with consistency. And it's great for the client, but it's also great for the other catering companies, because we're learning from each other and getting to do this together. And we otherwise wouldn't be able to do something with someone necessarily that's in California at the same time. So I think you're right. I think there's a lot to that, and people are just desperate for that, to still have those events in their life, no matter what they look like. They need that interaction.
Yeah, people need to eat. They need to socialize. I mean, that's one of the core things that we need as human beings, is this human connectivity. And for whatever millions of years, we've been doing it over food, over the fire in the cave, or wherever it was.
Right.
That's how we've been doing it. That's how we tell stories. We bond. We grow as humans that way. We grow in our relationships. So I think it's awesome to hear that. I did not know that that's where you guys were going, but just kind of imagining what could be possible. What I'm seeing is that I think these large events are going to be broken up into smaller events, and they're going to happen more locally. So you're going to have, I don't know the right term for it yet, but there's going to be very tight-knit groups that happen. Like if you have 10 or 20 or 30 people that are in one location, because that's all that's allowed, they're going to bond really tightly as if it was a small meeting. But you're going to have these pods around the city or around the country if it's a 300 or 3,000 person event. And you're going to have these pods of really highly connected, highly engaged individuals now. And I think that's going to change how our organizations work together. I think it's going to change, obviously, how we cater, how we do events. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's going to bring back some humanity that we've been losing a bit, in these big events, because, people get lost in a crowd, right?
Right.
And so how do we bring it back? I know, as an example, for a wedding, I have a friend of mine who they were going to postpone their wedding till it's all over. But as the longer it went on, they just said, we're going to get married. So they got married, and everyone else watched on Zoom, and they all brought their cocktails and everything else, Yeah. So I think we'll get creative, and we'll see a whole lot of new opportunities like that we can do. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it, because as tragic and as painful as this is to go through, I also know the human spirit cannot be beat. Mm-hmm. And we've got so many good people that are out there just coming up with crazy, wonderful, creative ideas that it's awesome to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's forcing us to all participate, because when you're in a group of 10, you can't be as quiet as you can in a group of 200.
Awesome.
So everybody has to come to the table. Yeah.
Exactly. You can't get lost in that crowd. I'm an introvert. I love to go to the back corner and stand against the wall, and just kind of like, if someone comes up and introduces themselves, that's great. But with a crowd, I get lost, and I can't do that right now, which is awesome. It's pulling me out of my shell, which is good.
Sure. That's good though.
Absolutely.
Well, it's exciting to see, how we spin this into a positive, because it's been such a challenging time for people. So hopefully we'll be able to look back at this and know what it was all about, and what we were meant to learn from it, and how we were meant to change. And hopefully our relationships will be a lot stronger, and our city will be a lot stronger. And
I think one of the things that we're going to see come out of this too, as kind of a side note, is we were definitely in what's been called the experience economy. We're making memories and buying feelings, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We saw that evolve a lot out of after 2008 and 2009,
Mm-hmm.
that we really shifted the economy that direction. I believe this is a catalyst for the economy to shift toward transformation, which what I mean by that is like people actually want to grow, learn new skills, develop as
Right.
individuals,
Mm-hmm.
really go to that higher level of self-actualization, right? They want to buy a new identity, become a different person. I see that. I mean, my kids had to finish school up online. They had to go literally from the classroom to online. I've been working from home, for a long time in traveling if I needed to, but everything now is from home, so there's been such the change for people that they've had to dig deep and learn skills quickly and transform quickly, that I think that this is just going to fuel that part of the economy even further. So I think we're going to be a transformational society over time.
I agree. And people have been in such a span of time with no job, that they're saying, I've always wanted to do this other thing. That when am I going to have a chance like this?
Yeah.
We're never. And that's one of the things we said when this first hit is we're going to go back and do all this back burner stuff because we will never have the opportunity to be able to go back and learn and fix and change and rewrite. Like now, we would never have this kind of time on our hands. And while it's painful, it's been such a blessing because we've been able to do things that we wouldn't have gotten to. So, hopefully our industry, we were very deficient in workers before this happened. So hopefully not too many of them are looking at different, career paths, but, hoping that people can get back to their passion and not just a job, that they really will be able to cook because they love to cook or plan because they love to plan and get back to what the true meaning of it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Becki. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Good to connect with you again and to do it in front of whatever number of people have shown up tonight. It's been awesome.
Well, I always appreciate talking to you.
Absolutely. This was fantastic. So again, everyone, this is Becki, and she is the founder and, I guess the owner of Dream Catering and Events here in Nashville. And they do phenomenal work. I've loved being friends and associated with the company for a long time. Just it's been fantastic to see you guys grow.